Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at our hydraulic shear, how to operate the shear and how to be safe around it. Behind us we have our HMI hydraulic shear, which is going to be used exclusively for our welding class to be cutting our plate stock to make our welding coupons. We get donated a lot of metal from local manufacturers, local machine shops, local stamping houses in town. So this here happens to be about 1/4 inch, 3/16 inch thick steel. And we're going to be cutting this down into smaller pieces. Though these are donated material to us, for our welding coupons for practice, we really only need pieces about 1/3 of this in size. So we are going to be cutting this down so we have less scrap, less waste on our end, and this metal is going to go farther when we do that. So one of the first things you're going to need before you come to the shear is to lay out what it is you're going to be cutting down. So for practice purposes, I'm going to cut this in about 3 pieces. So I'm just setting up some marks on here. So that I can scribe some lines. So for a practice coupon, we don't have to be real exact on size. If you were actually cutting this down to a proper size for a welding coupon for an assignment, you would be wanting to get that within an 1/8 inch tolerance. So we definitely would be caring more about size in that process. So we can see 2 lines on this piece of metal that I'm going to be cutting to on the shear. So some general things about the shear here. We have this chart on the shear wall that's going to be doing most of the work. And I want to zoom in on that chart a little bit so that we can see and read it. So that chart right there is the working capability or capacity of our hydraulic shear. So looking at that, we can take a piece that is 3/4 of an inch thick. So we're talking pretty thick and 6 inches wide, and this thing should cut it off. So this is a very strong working machine in order to cut almost any type of metal we have in this shop easily and quickly. So because of that, we have to be very cautious as well safety-wise, because this machine can definitely do damage to us if your hands and fingers or other body parts are in the wrong locations at any given time. It's going to cut through that kind of metal. It's not going to hesitate for anything you put in there to cut. So we want to make sure that we're safe as we're using this piece of equipment. For what we're doing right now, about 3/16 inch thick, we could cut something that's up to 18 inches wide. So almost the size of the table by 3/16, and this machine, when new, would cut that just fine. Now this thing is a little bit old. It's still a good workhorse, still works great. However, maybe it's not the full 18 inches anymore today. Although most of the time we're only cutting stuff that's like 6 inches wide, so it's going to cut that just fine. So we want to make sure that whatever we're cutting is within the working condition of this chart. This area right here is only for cutting flat stock. Flat stock right here in that part of the chart. If we're cutting other shapes, we're going to be using other areas. If we're cutting these other shapes, we're going to be using these other areas like here or here to do some of the work. Now, rarely, if ever, do we really have a reason to come over here and use those other shaped cutting spots, because most of what we're cutting is always going to be flat stock, which again is only cut in this area. This is only for flat stock. We have a guard right here. I want to take that off and just show a little bit about how this machine operates. You would always run it with the guard in place. So when we're actually operating it, the guard will always be in place. But basically what's going on here in front is we have a mechanism allowing us to clamp down our material so that we are not trying to hold on to that material by hand. And that's important to keep our fingers away from everything that's running here. So this large silver clamp here basically is moving a bar up or down allowing us to come down and clamp onto a piece of metal so that it's going to be held while we do all the work of cutting. So we want to make sure that we are clamping things down. Once in a while, again, this machine is old, this clamp here does tend to jam up. So we usually have a little soft dead blow hammer sitting here, and you'd use a soft hammer. We're just going to lightly assist this screw here to loosen up. Sometimes that'll jam up. Or you can come get the teacher and they'll help you out as well. We're not beating on this thing to loosen it up. This just needs a little bit of assistance once in a while to cut. And that'll happen less if you cut near this side of the shear, which just like a scissors, this is your pivot point right here. So this pivot point right here is where that scissors is coming down, and you can get more work cut right in that area than you can way out here. So same thing here, you're going to get more work cut here. It's going to have to work harder to cut out here. So the clamp will work better on this end of that. So again, we always want to have the clamp or the guard in place so our fingers have that much more chance to stay out of that area. In order to line up your cut, our cutting edge is this wall right here. This wall is our cutting edge. I know you can't see from where you are, but there's a piece of clear plexiglass right here, kind of like a window that allows us to see down onto the table on this edge. I want to line up one of our scratch lines, our scribe lines, right on this edge. So with the table up and the machine up, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look, and I'm lining up that line with this edge, and I'm going to go ahead and clamp it down. So now that is clamped down and ready to go. Some of the safety things, you might be working with a partner here as you operate the machine, and that's okay, but the operator is keeping their hands away from these areas so that our fingers aren't getting in the wrong spot. And on the same extent, and I apologize, I'm going to move the camera here, on the back side, as we can see our piece of metal sticking out right here, as we're cutting, this is coming down and shearing that piece of metal. I don't want the operator or the other person holding on to this metal on the other side, unless it's a really big piece and you're holding way out here. But even then, we have to be careful. Just let that piece of metal fall on the table like these scraps have fallen. So we are not holding, we're not putting our fingers anywhere in this area while we operate this machine. We're just going to let that piece of metal drop. All right, to turn the machine on, once a day, we're going to turn the main power switch on right here. And that's going to get power to the machine. And then when you're ready to operate it, here's our on-off switch essentially. So we're going to go up for on, we just lift. And when we're done, down. And the machine is off. So again, we'll just leave this on for the class period. If you're the first one there, turn it on. And then throughout the class period, you're going to turn this on and off from this switch right here. This is plastic, so be light on how you operate it. But we just lift and it turns it on. From here, we're ready to operate the machine. You can see it going up and down. So as long as we're clamped down on our line, we're going to go down until it cuts. Bring it back up, and we can go ahead and inspect what we have. So I'm walking around to the back side, or my partner would hand that to me at that point. Here's the piece that we just cut off, a nice little 2-inch-ish wide piece that we can do probably 5, 6, 7 different welding beads on. And then we can open up the clamp, and we cut on that line. So now we're going to flip it around and cut on the other line. I'm doing this with the machine off, less chance of something getting bumped and turned on while I'm operating it. So I typically have that off while I'm lining up my material. Now that my material's lined up, I always bring it way back up to the top when I'm done, just so it's out of the way for whatever it is we're working on. Now that piece I can't really grab from that side, so again with the machine off, here's the piece that fell. And I'm just going to use my fingers and grab the other piece that was sitting there under the clamp. But again, the machine was off when I did that. So here, and I wasn't paying too much attention on size, I was just cutting some parts for scrap so that we can get some practice welds going, and that's what we have here for that process. A couple other areas of this machine. This has got a lot of different operation moving components here for us. So when I'm operating this, here's our pivot points again. So as that one's going down, this half is coming up. So if I want to cut on either of these, it's actually on the upswing over here is doing the downswing over here. So if we watch that, so this side's coming up. So now this is up, and that in there is up. And if I was cutting, when I come down, this is going up, and that's cutting now. So with that idea, we have other cutting surfaces. If you were doing round stock, square stock, angle iron, we can use this side. So we talked about this guard always being in place. Another guard that I always talk about that I want to make sure is always down, regardless if you're using it or not, is I want this guard to always be in the down position. And I think that's important because when we're operating this machine, we're paying attention to this area most of the time. So if you've got a partner that's hanging out with you or somebody else, when we're running this machine, this is going up and down as well, and it is way wide open. So if somebody's sitting here like this watching you, or sitting here like this watching you, we're not paying attention to the fact that this machine is moving here as well. So I don't care if you're operating the machine, if you're just walking past the machine, if you just see this guard is up at any time, I want you to drop that guard down no matter what. I mean, unless we're actually using that side, which is pretty rare, if you ever see this guard up, please drop it down, because that's going to protect everybody in the class from a common mistake that could just accidentally happen for no reason. So by keeping that guard down, we're going to be safe. So we've looked at general operation. We've looked at how to turn the machine on and off for the day. We've looked at how to turn it on and off for each time we're using it. We've looked at how to operate it forward and backward on the actual usage. We've looked at how the clamp system works underneath of the guard so that we can line up our material and clamp that down, because we should not be holding metal with our fingers on the hydraulic shear. It needs to do its own work. And we talked about if the guard does get jammed, how to loosen that up and take this orange guard off, but this guard should stay on during operation. We talked about if you have a partner, the partner can be back here helping with parts, but they should not be holding on to those parts, or their fingers should not be in any of those areas. They should be back here waiting for it to drop, and then if you want to have them hand you the part, that's okay at that time. But it should be one person operation at all of our equipment. That way you're in control of your own stuff. Hopefully this video has helped a little bit with the basic understanding of our hydraulic shear, which is used in our welding classes to cut our welding coupons.